Today on Scripps News Live, a monumental decision from the Supreme Court as it rules race cannot play a factor in college admissions. Canadian fire officials warning wildfire smoke is likely to plague the United States all summer long.
They pulled us back to the gate and said, everybody off.
No sleep. It's certainly been a test of patience.
And one major airline calling for all hands on deck as it tries to tackle mass flight cancellations and delays. Plus, it was a pretty good night for this Yankees pitcher. In fact, you might say it was perfect. Inside the game that landed this Dominican Republic-born pitcher in the history books. Scripps News Live begins right now. Race can no longer be considered as a factor in college admissions. A little more than an hour ago now, the Supreme Court striking down affirmative action policies, ruling that they violate the Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment. Welcome to your Thursday edition of Scripps News Live. I'm Veronica Cruz. The Supreme Court's conservative majority ruling 6-3 against affirmative action in the Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard College case. Chief Justice John Roberts penning the majority opinion, writing, quote, that the law lacked sufficiently focused and measurable objectives warranting the use of race, and therefore, quote, unavoidably employed race in a negative manner. And that's why Chief Justice Roberts is concluding that affirmative action, quote, cannot be reconciled with the guarantees of the Equal Protection Clause. Let's get you right out to Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George, who's live for us right now in Washington. And Joe, I understand that you've been poring through this ruling, which is many pages. Tell us what has stood out to you so far.
Well, for one, to take the 10,000-foot view, it's another day in June in which this Supreme Court, under Chief Justice John Roberts, isn't afraid to overturn decades of judicial precedent. Remember, this wasn't the first time that affirmative action has been challenged at the highest court in the land. Ever since academic institutions began implementing affirmative action in the late 1960s, lawsuits were challenged. But in the 70s is when the Supreme Court began saying, no, that question is fair. That question can be asked. Today, the Supreme Court effectively banned affirmative action from coast to coast. We do have another quote from the Chief Justice in his landmark opinion, writing, many universities have for too long wrongly concluded that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. This nation's constitutional history does not tolerate that choice. There was a very intense dissent, though, from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who dissented in one of the cases. She said, with the let them eat cake obliviousness today, the majority pulls the ripcord and announces colorblindness for all by legal fiat. But deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. That was part of the dissent opinion from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. President Biden expected to speak on this topic in just about 30 minutes or so from the Roosevelt Room of the White House. We, of course, are monitoring what's going on at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The group that brought this suit and challenge to the Supreme Court, Students for Fair Admissions, their executive director, their president, Edward Bloom, has been fighting legal challenges around this issue literally for decades. He is expected to speak at an event at the Press Club later this afternoon. As far as the real-world impact on all of this, how does this impact your child's or your grandchild's? Maybe you have a son or daughter in high school. The implication here is that right now, from coast to coast, universities, colleges, many of them are having to rethink their college application and their process for admission. Not all. Remember, affirmative action previously was restricted in 9 states. California restricted it back in 1996. Michigan has restricted it for years as well. So is Florida, other states. But for the great deal of colleges and universities who have very intense diversity goals, inclusivity goals, now their mission is going to have to shift. Some of the ideas that have been thrown out are targeting certain zip codes for college admissions, going to certain disadvantaged high schools. Those are some of the processes for the college admission process that universities universities are going to have to follow now that this race question is essentially banned. So another historic day here at the United States Supreme Court. And oh, by the way, it's going to be another historic day tomorrow. Justice is announcing that tomorrow will be the final day of the term, and that means we will get the student loan forgiveness decision tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. And to your point, in terms of those dissents coming down, Justice Sonia Sotomayor saying that this ruling rolls back decades of precedent and momentous progress. And that reaction has been coming in swiftly from both sides, people who support it and those who are just not in favor of this decision. What else are you seeing out there right now?
Well, it's important for us to realize that there was a lot of polling that's been done, a poll done by Pew Research in the last 6 months or so, in which 50% of Americans actually disapproved of asking the race question in the college admissions process. So there are people likely streaming along with us, watching along with us here on Scripps News, who are saying, you know what, I don't think that question should be asked. There are others, including former President Barack Obama, who has already out with a statement saying affirmative action, to paraphrase the former president, may not be perfect, but it has helped generations of Americans. And the best way to look at, okay, what happens next, the University of California wrote to the Supreme Court. They had to restrict affirmative action, as we said, back in 1996. They said in the years that followed that saw a decline in their student populations when it came to black students, and that they had to spend around $500 million thus far in different ways to achieve diversity and achieve inclusivity on campus. And they wrote in their brief that essentially those efforts have not really worked. So now the fallout begins. It is going to be a case that's certainly going to be talked about, not just in law schools for years to come, but certainly in college admissions offices around the country. I suspect there's a few emergency meetings happening right now about how the application process go from here.
Yeah, you're right about that, Joe. And the one thing it does do is it rolls back decades now of legal precedent. So again, we're going to have to watch the implications of this one closely. Joe St. George reporting from Washington there. And Joe was just talking moments ago about the former president, Barack Obama, and Michelle, who both released a statement shortly after the Supreme Court's ruling saying, quote, like any policy, affirmative action wasn't perfect, but it allowed generations of students like Michelle and me to prove we belonged. Now it's up to all of us to give young people the opportunities they deserve and help students everywhere benefit from new perspectives. President Biden is expected to address the Supreme Court's decision to strike down affirmative action in the next half hour. He's now scheduled to speak from the Roosevelt Room at the White House at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll bring you those remarks live as they happen. And another developing story that we are watching for you this hour. Legal troubles appear to be mounting for former President Trump yet again. Multiple media outlets right now reporting that Trump's former personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has met one-on-one with special counsel Jack Smith. Scripps News national political correspondent Kevin Cirilli live in Washington for us right now. So, Kevin, there's been a lot of speculation here about Giuliani agreeing to testify. What more can you tell us on this front?
Confusion. That's how three sources close to former President Trump's 2024 campaign put it to me earlier this morning. That's what they're all trying to sort through, as now new reports surface that former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, a former lawyer to Trump and a legal advisor to Trump, is now testifying before the probe into January 6th. Now, reportedly, he has been asked about the fundraising operation following the legitimate results of the 2020 election, in which Trump tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election, and the fundraising that the Trump operation coordinated with what they called the Stop the Steal campaign. And now all talk is turning inside of Trump's orbit whether or not Giuliani is cooperating from a legal perspective, but also is he flipping against his former boss. Now, one source in particular who has talked to Trump quite frequently over the last couple of weeks has said that Trump is not, or this source rather, is not concerned that Giuliani would flip against Trump in a way that his former fixer, Michael Cohen, did several years ago in relation to the Stormy Daniels hush money payment case. So a massive development. It's also important because from Trump world's perspective, the January 6th probe is the case that has the most uneasy in terms of its impacts, not just legally, but from a general election voter perspective. And it appears to be nearing the conclusion now, as Giuliani has reportedly testified before that investigation. Veronica?
All right, Kevin's really live for us in Washington. Kevin, always appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Straight ahead on Scripps News Live, airlines scrambling right now to get flight cancellations and those delays under control ahead of the July 4th holiday weekend. Also, a collision with a water truck sending an Amtrak train off the rails in California. Plus, officials in Canada right now warning that wildfire smoke will plague the United States all summer long. We'll have that for you when Scripps News Live comes back.
I've been putting off getting life insurance, and I'm not getting any younger.
Have you been thinking about getting a life insurance plan but just keep putting it off? Was that a yes? Then this message is for you. I'm David Denowitz, and I know the importance of life insurance. And that's why I'm here to tell you it's not too late to get the coverage you need.
If you're between the ages of 45 and 85, you can get a policy with a benefit of up to $25,000 and rates available at $5 a week. The phone lines are now open. Just call 800-354-6059.
And your acceptance is guaranteed.
I have a pre-existing medical condition. Is my acceptance guaranteed?
Yes.
Can I get accepted without a medical exam?
Yes. If you're between 45 and 85, you can't be turned down for this guaranteed acceptance life insurance regardless of your health. Plus, there's no medical exam and no health questions. And rates start at just $5 a week. Remember, if you're between 45 and 85, you can't be turned down regardless of your health. Nothing's more important than family. So call now, pick up the phone, and get guaranteed acceptance life insurance today.
Just call 800-354-6059.
I'm 72 and on a fixed income. Is my acceptance guaranteed?
Yes, your acceptance is guaranteed, and your rate can never go up for any reason. You can't be turned down regardless of your health. There's just one simple question. Are you between 45 and 85? If you answered yes, don't wait another minute. Call now.
The call is absolutely free, and there is no obligation to enroll. Just call 800-354-6059. That's 800-354-6059.
Do you spend hours maintaining your gutters? Save that time with LeafGuard's maintenance-free system. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS. Mesh filters sit on top of your gutters, building up debris and eventually clogging. Then they need to be cleaned too. Honestly, your home should have been built with LeafGuard gutters. LeafGuard's wraparound hood deflects debris and keeps water away from your home. The one-piece seamless system is strong, 20% thicker than average, and built to last. Plus, LeafGuard is guaranteed to never clog for as long as you own your home. Right now, get a complete LeafGuard system for only $99 down, $99 a month, and $99 installation. You'll also receive a $100 Visa gift card with a free gutter inspection and in-home estimate. Damage from clogged gutters can cost you thousands. Never worry about clogged gutters again. Don't wait, you've still got time. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS today. That's 1-833-2-GUTTERS.
A dense plume of smoke that parked over parts of the upper Midwest yesterday, now sweeping east. A cold front is pushing the hazardous air mass toward the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. But this air mass is slow moving, and that means a dangerous haze will linger over some cities that have already been under a blanket of smoke now for days. And today, air quality alerts are back in places in cities like Pittsburgh, New York, and Washington, D.C. Scripps News meteorologist Scott Withers has been tracking that smoke for us and the heat, which has been making conditions miserable for millions of Americans.
The Canadian wildfire smoke is clogging the skies from the Statue of Liberty to the nation's capital, across to the western shores of the Mississippi River. 120 million Americans are under air quality alerts today. Smoke choking the Midwest. You can see it there. Barely see the buildings. That's Pittsburgh. 5 American cities have some of the worst world air quality right now. The worst one on the planet, Chicago. Second, Detroit. Third, Washington, D.C. Minneapolis comes in 7th. New York City also moving up the list. They're about 9th now. I want you to take a look at how widespread this air quality alerts are today. More than a dozen states. Look at that. The Northeast, the Great Lakes getting the worst of it. Here's what's happening on the satellite. Just like a few weeks ago, there are about 500 wildfires burning across Canada, half of them way up here out of control. That smoke funneling down here between these two systems. Those systems are holding the smoke, but they are now moving. And as they move to the east and the south, that's good news if you're in Wisconsin and Chicago because it's finally getting blown out. Bad news if you're down here in Pittsburgh or down in Washington, D.C., because that smoke is on its way and it is going to be very thick again today. Another third of the country out of the smoke and into the fire. 95 million Americans suffering through scorching heat. The heat dome that's been over Texas finally moving, now settling over the lower Mississippi River Valley from Memphis down to New Orleans. That feels like temperature today. Going to range between 115 to 120. Take a look. NASA put this animation together showing how the heat wave has settled over the Lone Star State and then spread to the Gulf Coast and now up the Mississippi River Valley. Scientists are saying that climate change is altering the jet stream, which has held that heat dome in place for so long and ahead when we should be seeing these kind of temperatures. All right, everyone looking to cool down, including this Little Rock, Arkansas police officer. Tried to use the kids' slip and slide, didn't really work, but he wasn't, you can see, not too good at it. The kids helped cool him down with their squirt guns. Thanks, kids. We appreciate that. All right, now the high pressure across the south. Look, just empty on there, keeping all the storms away. We got this one major issue up here, Kansas, Nebraska, right along the border in the Great Plains. As that system moves to the east, we're going to see some strong storms up in that area. Large hail the size of baseballs coming down later today. That's where we see our severe weather alerts. Davenport, Iowa, across central Illinois to southern Indiana and into Louisville, Kentucky. Look at all that gray across the Midwest and the Northeast. Those are the air quality alerts. Many cities in code orange or red alert today. And then the excessive heat warnings across the lower Mississippi River Valley, Texas. You know what? It's not as bad as we've seen in the last 2 weeks. They're getting a little bit of a break. Out west, the heat ramping up from San Francisco all the way south to the Los Angeles area and then across into Las Vegas. The worst is going to be this weekend out in that area. The smoke will start clearing out in the Midwestern cities later today and will let up in the East Coast later this week. But the heat, it's going to stretch through the 4th of July holiday. So stay inside in the air conditioning and drink lots of water.
All right, Scotty, thank you so much. The smoke could begin to clear in parts of Indiana, Illinois, and Minnesota by the end of the day, but officials are warning that wildfire smoke is going to be a problem all summer long, and that's because there are still close to 500 active wildfires burning across Canada right now. Now, the heavy rain that hit Quebec earlier this week missed the areas with the heaviest fire activity, and as you can see from this map right here, there are fires burning from one end of the country all the way to the other. Scripps News national correspondent Maura Sirianni reports now in the cities that the smoke has hit the hardest and the international efforts to extinguish these blazes.
The concerns are mainly for those people in sensitive groups, but experts say none of us should be breathing in this air for too long. This map shows the smoke is expected to move east, but for now, New Jersey is in the code orange. For air quality, that means at-risk groups like people with asthma will likely be feeling those effects, although the general public may not. Meantime, entire states, like you saw on that map, Delaware and Pennsylvania, are both under code red. These are images from Pittsburgh this morning. Residents in Philly, Baltimore, Cincinnati, you're likely waking up to a similar picture. Now, in this case, code red is due to high smoke particle concentration. Doctors say these particles are so small they can actually get into your bloodstream. Now in Chicago, the mayor's office there is asking those with chronic lung or heart conditions to stay inside, and we're mainly feeling the effects from the fires that are burning in Ontario and Quebec. The latest maps from Canada showing over 250 fires are still burning out of control. Canadian officials say the country is on track for its worst wildfire season in nearly 30 years, and the world is helping. Firefighters from the U.S., Australia, Portugal, France, and Spain are all working together to get these fires in Canada under control. Maura Sirianni, Scripps News.
All right, Maura, thank you for that. Coming up next on Scripps News Live, some people's summer travel plans are taking a detour as we track those mass flight cancellations and delays and a norovirus outbreak that has already been sickening hundreds of cruise ship passengers. We're going to have the details on that as well. Scripps News Live is back after this.
I was having problems with my legs and my feet.
I suffered a lot of cramps, swelling.
I would dread going up and down steps.
Tingling in my legs due to circulation issues.
The aches and pains have just continued to increase.
Did you know if you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, or are over 40, your leg aches and pains could be from poor circulation? Revitive can help reduce leg aches and pains, swelling, and cramps. Revitive uses breakthrough technology to get your calf muscles pumping like a second heart to increase blood flow, reducing leg aches and pains, cramps, or swollen feet and ankles.
Plus, it's drug-free.
The cramping was terrible, and I don't get that anymore. Thank you, Revitive.
Revitive is FDA cleared and clinically proven to increase oxygen-rich blood flow during use. The smart stimulation works so well, over 3 million people use Revitive.
As a firefighter, I'm constantly on my feet. I wish I had known about Revitive a lot earlier. It would have made a huge difference in really who I am today.
Revitive has given me a better quality of life because I am living without pain.
Revitive reduces leg pains 2 times more than exercise alone in just 6 weeks.
We want to take walks. We want to do more social activities, just the typical things in life that I did not feel well enough before Revitive that I was able to do.
Now, Revitive is regenerizing my legs and making me feel like, let's do more.
Go to Revitive.com now to learn how Revitive can help reduce leg aches and pains, swelling, and cramps.
The doctor said go for it, and I'm in the best shape in terms of my legs and my ankles and my feet than I've ever been.
Try Revitive. You will see the difference. It works. It worked for me.
Get the most out of life with Revitive. Visit Revitive.com. That's REVITIVE.com. Or call
1-800-317-6641. That's 1-800-317-6641 today. Or visit Revitive.com. Order now.
I don't get paid until next week.
I got you. I'm Dave, and I can spot you up to $500 of your future money instantly.
Up to $500 instantly? What else is in my future?
A new couch. Oli!
Get up to $500 instantly with Dave.
Sure, you should teach him to ride a bike. Then use Greenlight and teach him how to invest in bikes. Teach him to be smart about money, and he'll go far.
Super far! Oh, hey, Mom!
Navigate the world of money together. Invest in your best investment. Greenlight.
There's a better way to begin your mornings.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Rush. Thanks so much for being with us.
Context and conversation.
There's a new study that might make you feel a little bit better, okay? So listen to this.
On the stories that will shape each day.
Here with us now is meteorologist Scott Withers. You got just wave after wave after wave.
So you can get on with yours.
Make sure you stay with us as we monitor this developing story.
Morning Rush, weekday mornings starting at 7, 6 Central, only on Scripps News.
Hey there, welcome back to Scripps News Live. I'm Veronica Cruz. So this summer travel season has been off to a bit of a rough start. Yesterday alone, hundreds of thousands of passengers saw their flights delayed or canceled. And we're also closely watching a norovirus outbreak that's already been sickening more than 700 cruise ship passengers. Let's go ahead and begin right here with those flight cancellations and delays. FlightAware.com saying more than 1,900 flights have been delayed in the United States alone today. 453 U.S. flights have been canceled. O'Hare Airport reporting the most delays. There's bad weather west and south of Chicago right now, as well as Denver and Houston. United Airlines struggling a lot this week. The carrier canceling 2,300 flights between Saturday and yesterday, and it canceled 20% of its flights Tuesday, 39% yesterday. United CEO is blaming air traffic control shortages and bad weather in the Northeast right now. And that earned this response from Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg.
United Airlines has some internal issues they need to work through. They've really been struggling this week, even relative to other U.S. airlines. But where we do agree is that there need to be more resources for air traffic control. That's why we're hiring 1,500 more controllers this year. We got plans for another 1,800 controllers next year.
United says off-duty flight attendants are now calling in from across the country to help handle open trips. It expects things to improve by the weekend. So travelers wonder whether the delays and cancellations are a precursor of what the rest of the summer is going to be like. National correspondent James Packard looks into what you can expect.
Another day of travel chaos as the July 4th holiday barrels closer.
No sleep. It's certainly been a test of patience.
Tens of thousands of delays since the weekend. More than 6,700 cancellations as of Wednesday afternoon. At Newark Liberty Airport around 2 a.m. Wednesday, an endless line for customer service and stranded passengers on cots. The same in Denver. The problems worsened Tuesday night when severe storms put a halt on all planes taking off or landing at all 3 major New York area airports.
So I'm traveling to Maine for a work trip, and unfortunately every flight just there has been delayed. I don't even have my luggage. It's been over 2 days and I still haven't even seen Maine.
At the FAA's command center outside Washington, D.C., Chris Citrola is part of the FAA's team trying to manage the mess.
And what happens is a domino effect of issues. We have crews that can't get to where they need to go to. We can't get crews out of where they need to go to. And that starts turning into a lot of issues at the airport itself.
When thunderstorms stack too many planes in one place, controllers are forced to pump the brakes on scheduled flights.
And what that'll help out do is slow or stop the traffic going into those airports to allow that congestion and allow those crews to get out of those airports, and then to provide spots for us to get new aircraft into those airports.
And inside airline network control centers, certain mayhem as they try to coordinate the complicated dance of planes and crews across the country. United Airlines pulled back the curtain for us at their Chicago operation in early 2020.
Craig owns everything Airbus 319, and his job is to fix all the problems.
This plane in Newark, for example, that's out of service today, it's got a line of flights on it when it goes out of service. Now you've got to take those flights and put them on some other airplane.
And actually, that's what the router's going to do. So I will, we'll suggest swaps. The router sort of manages those into the future, and then he has to coordinate with maintenance planners and other people.
A lot of times it seems like you're out there by yourself on the tarmac with a delay, but we've got a whole team in the background trying to fix it.
But that problem solving is messy and infuriating inside those airports.
Yeah, 5 hours on the plane took us off. Pilots timed out. 2 more crew members timed out. Started pushing back each flight 45 minutes, 45 minutes, 45 minutes. Lost another pilot to timeout. Finally canceled the flight around 7:30.
James Packard, Scripps News, Los Angeles.
All right, so that is the situation there in the air. And if you're not taking a break this summer by plane, then maybe you are hitting the open sea instead. But a heads up right here, as norovirus outbreaks have been hitting the cruise ship industry hard, with nearly 700 reported cases in 13 outbreaks, which is the highest number of a single year in a decade. Many ships are packed with passengers eager to take to the seas after being homebound during the coronavirus pandemic. And the Centers for Disease Control is reporting that the majority of cases were on Royal Caribbean ships. Experts say norovirus spreads more quickly on ships where people congregate for longer periods of time. Doctors are saying even a small amount of exposure to the virus can cause norovirus to spread. I'm Veronica Cruz. For the audience leaving us right now, your local programming is up next. And don't forget, you can always check us out on scripsnews.com, and you can learn where to watch at scripsnews.com/TV. Now, if you're staying with us, there is much more news headed your way on Scripps News Live. We're going to tell you about the unrest in the streets of France following the police shooting death of a 17-year-old teenager. Also, concerns mounting right now for a top Russian general who hasn't been spotted in days amid reports that he supported the Wagner Group's rebellion against Moscow. We'll have the details next. You're watching Scripps News Live.
If you, like many people, are covered by both Medicare and your state's Medicaid, here's something important to know. Now you could get even more health benefits than you already have. It's the United Healthcare Dual Complete Plan. To find out if you or someone you care about is eligible, it's easy. Call now to talk with us. We can explain it all and answer your questions. Medicaid gives you benefits, and Medicare gives you some too. But a dual complete plan can add even more benefits and features compared to original Medicare. You'll have lots of doctors and hospitals to choose from. $0 copays on all covered prescriptions, including brand names. And depending on where you live, you could enjoy other benefits too, like more dental care and rides to and from your doctor or pharmacy. Most plans even give you up to $300 a month to help pay for covered over-the-counter products, groceries, and new this year, utility bills. And best of all, with this plan, there's no extra cost to you. Remember, if you have Medicare and Medicaid, chances are you could get a dual complete plan. So call now to talk with us. Our agents are available to help. We know healthcare can be confusing. United Healthcare can straighten things out. And with over 40 years of experience, you can count on us to be there for you. With a dual complete plan, you could have a wide choice of doctors to choose from. $0 copays on all covered prescriptions. Help paying for covered over-the-counter products, groceries, and utility bills. More dental coverage, too, all at no extra cost. If you have both Medicare and Medicaid, you may be eligible for dual complete. So call the number on your screen now to see if you're eligible or to enroll. There's more for you with the United Healthcare Dual Complete Plan.
Hey there. Welcome to Scripps News Live. I'm Veronica Cruz. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday. Always good to see you. Let's get you up to speed right now on the biggest stories that we're tracking for you. At any moment from now, President Biden will deliver remarks from the White House on the Supreme Court's decision to strike down affirmative action policies. The High Court ruling 6-3 that using race as a factor in college admissions violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The decision was a response to cases against Harvard and the University of North Carolina. A number of universities maintain race-insured more diverse student bodies. Opponents have argued that using race as a requirement discriminated against qualified students. And smoke from Canadian wildfires spreading to the mid-Atlantic and Northeast while it continues to linger over the Midwest. Pennsylvania and Delaware among states that have issued code red warnings, meaning that the air is unhealthy for everyone. In Chicago right now, the mayor is asking people with chronic lung and heart conditions to stay indoors. Now to California, where a Ventura County water truck driver suffered a head injury when an Amtrak train hit his truck while on the tracks. 16 people on the train went to the hospital with minor injuries. Most of those passengers walked off the train, though, with their luggage. 3 of the train's 7 cars derailed 50 miles northwest of downtown LA. All remained upright. The train was on its way to Seattle. Developing now overseas, the Kremlin pushing back against claims that a top general in the Russian military not only knew about the Wagner Group's plans for rebellion, but also supported them. The New York Times citing American intelligence reports that show Russian General Sergei Surgokhin had knowledge that Friday night's rebellion was going to take place in advance. Those same reports also claim that he supported the Wagner Group leaders' plans to overthrow Russia's defense ministry leadership by force. And this morning, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov dismissed the New York Times reporting, as well as a similar article in the Wall Street Journal as, quote, speculation and gossip. He's insisting that Russia is unified and that its people and military support Russian President Vladimir Putin without question. Scripps News national political correspondent Alex Miller has more now on these new reports, as well as one eye-opening report that suggests that the general has now gone missing.
One general, Sergei Surovkin, who has actually, according to the Financial Times, been missing, has not been heard from since Saturday. There are unconfirmed reports that he has been missing, and in this, it is because of his involvement in this attempt from Prigozhin to head towards Moscow. The New York Times reporting that he had knowledge, Surovkin had knowledge that this was going to take place ahead of time. There's also more officials that told the Times that there could have been other people involved in this within the Russian military, helping Prigozhin and to carry out these plans. And so the one question is where is Sergei Surovkin right now? Surovkin. He made a video on Friday that asked everyone to stand down, to ask the Wagner Group to stand down, but U.S. officials told the Times that they believe it was more of a hostage-like video. You know, where does Putin stand with his own people right now? That is the big question. The Kremlin has come out against this, saying that he has been surrounded by people who support him, called all of this gossip. But the real question is he going to be able to keep the people? Does he want to keep the people around him? And can he really trust the people who were potentially involved in this, or who even just let it happen and let it get as big as it did?
All right, Alex, thank you. That was Alex Miller reporting there for us. And another major story that we are following for you right now: fires and violent protests rocking cities across France. protest started after police fatally shot a 17-year-old during a traffic stop on Tuesday. Authorities are investigating the officer who pulled the trigger for voluntary homicide. French President Emmanuel Macron holding a special security meeting this morning about those violent protests, acknowledging that people are frustrated, but then calling for peace. Correspondent Ross Cullen spoke with Morning Rush's Lindsay Tuckman about the situation in Paris right now.
Ross, there are reports of arrests and some injuries. What do we know now?
Yeah, the news that the police officer who fired the deadly shot on Tuesday that killed the 17-year-old Nael has now been charged. That coming just after the scenes that we have been seeing. This afternoon, French time, we had a peaceful march, some 6,000 people marching, being led by the teenager's mother in tribute to him in the suburb in the west of Paris where the deadly shooting took place. In the last hour or so, as you mentioned, that's deteriorated. The security situation there has got worse. We have seen the police responding, firing tear gas. The protesters have been throwing projectiles at law enforcement, setting fire to trash cans, and there has been a general deterioration of that scene after the end of the peaceful march led by the victim's mother. Most people wearing white or light-coloured clothing for that walk in memory of Nael. We do expect that there could be more violence this evening. The Interior Ministry here in France has put 40,000 extra police officers on standby across the country, 5,000 in this city, in Paris alone, to try to control crowds if there is going to be a third consecutive night of violence. We did see last night trams, buses, cars set alight. The City Hall in different places was torched. Schools were burned. Other buildings were burned as anger continues over this fatal shooting of a 17-year-old boy, which happened on Tuesday during a traffic stop.
Yeah, and Ross, can you just tell us a little bit more about what officials are doing regarding the actual case itself?
Well, the case itself, they are looking at all the different angles for this. The key point, which has also sparked a lot of public anger, was the fact that there was this police version of accounts, that the car was being driven towards them and they fired in self-defense. But that was contradicted by the video, which has been verified by French media circulating on social media, which showed a stationary car, police officers standing next to that stationary car, the car driver's window open and a weapon being pointed inside before that weapon was fired, and the 17-year-old driver died of bullet wounds to the chest. There was also a wounded witness in the car. They were speaking to her, another person in the car who fled. They were trying to speak to that person, and of course now this officer who's been charged with voluntary homicide.
All right, Ross Cullen reporting from Paris. Thank you for the update.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting the Chinese spy balloon that floated across the U.S. in February used American technology to collect data. The Journal is saying U.S. defense and intelligence investigators found U.S. products were used with Chinese gear to record photos, video, and other information. And it took 8 days for the balloon to travel from Alaska to when it was shot down off the coast of South Carolina. And the U.S. Coast Guard is saying that there are likely human remains in the debris of the Titan submersible that has been brought ashore. Investigators say the Titan and its 5 passengers were descending to the Titanic shipwreck when that vessel imploded. Authorities hope the debris will offer more clues about what exactly happened.
Well, it'll be very similar to an air crash study investigation. And one way we like to think about it is to treat it as a crime scene. So with robots, cameras, lasers, LiDAR, make a complete map of that site on the bottom of the ocean, because it's not very easily accessible. So you want to be able to take that back to the laboratory, to the forensic experts.
The submersible lost contact with its mothership an hour and 45 minutes into that dive. Want to get you to some breaking news coming from the Supreme Court right now, which our Deputy Political Director Joe St. George says has just been evacuated. He's joining us now live. All right, Joe, give us the lay of the land, because I understand that it's not just the Supreme Court that's been evacuated, but also one House building. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, and you're seeing right behind me, you can see the Capitol Police officers, the Supreme Court officials, basically moving crowds away from the Supreme Court complex. You can see the directions are continuing to be given. Hey, Sam, that's my backpack there. I don't want to shut down the Capitol over my black backpack. Could you go grab that? Thank you. That's Sam's our producer. But first off, it's important context for people to know at home that there are closures in Washington frequently. There are security issues sometimes frequently in Washington. We don't know specifically what exactly is going on, but obviously very unusual, even after a controversial, even after a high stakes day at the Supreme Court like this, for me to be pushed very now far away, probably about 100 yards or so from the steps of the United States Supreme Court. Obviously, people standing around here, a lot of tourists standing around here, people who came out here as journalists, producers, photographers, trying to figure out what's going on. It's important for us to keep this, in perspective here. We haven't been told anything specifically about any threat, but obviously this is a day in which the landmark affirmative action opinion just came down. That came down just after 10 a.m. Eastern time this morning, and now there's a bit of a security issue in front of the steps of the Supreme Court. The street closed off. For perspective, Veronica, I've been here on the Supreme Court for a lot of historic days, the historic abortion decision, for instance. They did not do this on the day that the historic Roe v. Wade, reversing Roe v. Wade decision came down. So this is a bit unusual, I will say this, although it's not unusual for necessarily a security issue to arise in our nation's capital. But obviously, on a day in which a lot of people were already on edge following this affirmative action decision and another landmark ruling from the Supreme Court, this making the mood a bit more tense on this Thursday afternoon in Washington, Veronica.
Yeah, you're right about that, Joe. And as I look at all the people that are kind of milling about outside of that building, I have to ask you, has the Supreme Court been open to the public?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right about that in the sense of what has been the protocol post-pandemic. So during the course of the pandemic, the court very much shut down. After this was the first term in which the public, journalists, we were allowed back in the court. So there was the ability for the public to listen to these oral arguments, to listen to opinions being rendered. But situations like this always prompt a debate about security at the Supreme Court. If you recall, following the January 6th insurrection, even during the discussion of the Dobbs decision from last year, the Supreme Court put up a large wall, stronger barricades. Certainly not the case here today. But again, I think it's always important to keep all of this in perspective. Here in Washington, we get moved, journalists get moved from time to time. Obviously, police, the Supreme Court, the Capitol Police, their job is to protect these institutions and in many cases keep us safe. So we're certainly grateful for them for telling us to leave our live shot location with all our lights and our microphones to get here and report the news a bit further away from the Supreme Court on this historic day.
All right, Joe, well, you stay safe. And of course, we're going to be circling back with you again. Joe St. George there reporting that the Supreme Court has been evacuated right after they issued that ruling on affirmative action. We're going to stay on top of this breaking news for you and bring you the details as we get them. Straight ahead on Scripps News Live, newly released body camera video showing a brave police officer putting an end to a terrifying attack at a Texas mall.
What you got? Are we on mass shooter?
We'll have new information for you next. You're watching Scripps News Live.
This year, Americans will spend $41 billion on auto repairs.
That's right, billions with a B. Why is that number so high? Because cars break down. Your vehicle is going to end up in a shop like this too, and if it's no longer under warranty, you're the one who has to pay the bill, and it could cost you thousands of dollars. That is, unless you call CarShield. With a plan through CarShield, administrators will pay for those costly repairs directly to the mechanic of your choice, including dealerships. That means you get protection on major parts and systems like the engine, transmission, electrical systems, and more. Plus, 24/7 emergency services for flat or damaged tires, lockouts, dead batteries, and towing at no additional cost. And there are even rental car options to keep you on the road.
I've been a mechanic for 35 plus years now. I've seen thousands of repairs over the years. My happiest customers are the ones that come in do have some kind of auto protection policy that's going to cover the repair that they wasn't expecting anyway. I feel great about recommending CarShield to everybody I see.
CarShield has a rich history of dependability, reliability, and success, and has been featured on leading networks like ABC, CNN, Fox News, and more. CarShield is America's most trusted auto protection company.
My mom told me to call CarShield, and I saved $5,000. You should always listen to your mom.
As soon as my car broke down, CarShield jumped into action, and I had my car back within days.
I've been with CarShield for close to 7 years. I have 3 vehicles covered, and I saved close to $9,000.
I called CarShield and saved over $5,000.
Yes, CarShield is a good value. Every plan through CarShield comes with a price lock guarantee, which means no matter how many repairs you need, the price you pay today will never change for as long as you cover your car.
Call now and save money with your price lock guarantee. It's not a matter of if your car will break down, but when. Call CarShield now before it's too late. Call 800-287-5264. 800-287-5264. 800-287-5264.
Sure, you'll teach her how to drive a car. Then use Greenlight to power her independence with crash detection with 911 dispatch, family location sharing, and emergency SOS alerts. Invest in your best investment with Greenlight.
This is a paid advertisement for legal services. If you've been diagnosed with mesothelioma, call now. Billions have been set aside for victims. You may be entitled to compensation. Call now, 1-800-712-3700. That's 1-800-712-3700.
Digging deeper into the headlines.
We have some big stories to get to tonight.
Shedding light on groundbreaking investigations and ending your night with something new.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Christian Bryant.
Scripps News Tonight, live tonight, starting at 8/7 Central.
Newly released body camera video shows the police officer who confronted a shooter at an outlet mall in Allen, Texas last month.
We did. And say always the
seatbelt.
Wow.
145. I think we got shots fired at the outlet mall. What you got? Are we on mass shooter?
After several minutes, the officer finds the gunman, shoots him, and puts an end to his attack. The shooter killed 8 people before that officer fatally shot him. The motive is still unknown. A grand jury said the officer's use of force was justified, and the shooting has renewed state lawmakers' calls to implement stricter gun laws.
Being able to walk down Congress Avenue today in Austin, Texas, or any other city in Texas, walk down there with your AR-15, and not one cop can ask you one thing about it, because that is the kind of laws that they have passed.
Governor Greg Abbott has maintained the mass shooting problem isn't about guns, but instead in addressing mental health. Unsealed court documents show an Indiana man charged with killing 2 teenage girls in 2017 admitted to committing the murders. Documents revealed Richard Allen confessed multiple times during an April phone call with his wife while he was in prison. Police arrested Allen last October on 2 counts of murder. He pleaded not guilty. Caitlin Kendall with Scripps News Indianapolis explains where this investigation stands right now.
118 documents unsealed of 136 filed in the case against Richard Allen, the man accused of killing Abby Williams and Libby German.
We didn't want them to, blow the case.
Special Judge Frangel ultimately deciding the public should see the case being built against Allen.
Excited is a weird word to say with something this horrific, but yes, in a way, excited, I guess is the word, and hopeful.
Excitement for the first time seeing what the state is using in the case against Allen.
Whatever they were keeping, we were hoping it was good, enough to get a conviction.
The documents reveal the following. Richard Allen admitted several times to his wife in a jailhouse phone call back in April to killing Abby and Libby. His wife hung up the phone.
The whole thing has felt eerie to us.
Allen's defense team has been adamant that the admissions of guilt hold no substance, citing Allen's mental state. After that phone call, authorities reported Allen started acting strange, including a time he tried to eat a document his attorneys gave him and refusing to sleep.
Everybody's just been taken aback by it.
The documents also reveal for the first time how the girls died, saying an autopsy revealed their wounds were caused by a sharp object. Documents go on to say that the girls' clothes were found down the creek, but a pair of underwear and a sock was missing from the crime scene.
We'll probably never really know what happened that day. We might hear it in court, speculated.
There is also a letter written by a fellow inmate saying the guards were calling Alan a kid killer and making fun of his wife.
That's all we want. Yep, for the right person to pay for it.
People in Delphi Wednesday say it's a lot of information to digest, adding they're hopeful for trial.
I'll believe it when it holds up in court.
Now, all of these documents will be used in court. Richard Allen's trial is set for January of next year. We'll, of course, be there and bring you the very latest. In Delphi, I'm Caitlin Kendall.
Now, the leading suspect in a cold case murder who eluded capture for nearly 40 years is now behind bars in Florida. Donald Santini's time on the run ended earlier this month with his capture in California. Yesterday, he was extradited to the Tampa area to be tried in the 1984 killing of Cynthia Wood. Santini was the last person to be seen with her before she was strangled. His fingerprints were found on her body. Investigators say his arrest finally gives her family a shot at closure. Happening right now at the White House, President Biden delivering remarks on the Supreme Court's decision to strike down affirmative action. Let's take you inside the Roosevelt Room right now.
45 years, the United States Supreme Court has recognized the college's freedom to decide how to build diverse student bodies and to meet their responsibility of opening doors of opportunity for every single American. In case after case, including recently, just as a few years ago in 2016, the court has affirmed and reaffirmed this view that colleges could use race not as a determinative factor for admission, but as one of the factors among many in deciding who to admit from a already qualified pool of applicants. Today, the court once again walked away from decades of precedent and as the dissent has made clear. The dissent states in today's decision, quote, rolls back decades of precedent and momentous progress, end of quote. I agree with that statement from the dissent. The court has effectively ended affirmative action in college admissions, and I strongly disagree with the court's decision. Because affirmative action is so misunderstood, I want to be clear, make sure everybody's clear about what the law has been and what it has not been until today. Many people wrongly believe that affirmative action allows unqualified students to be admitted ahead of qualified students. This is not how college admissions work. Rather, colleges set out standards for admission, and every student has to meet those standards. Then and only then, after first meeting the qualifications required by the school, do colleges look at other factors in addition to their grades, such as race. The way it works in practice is this. Colleges first establish a qualified pool of candidates based on meeting certain grade, test scores, and other criteria. Then and only then, it is from this pool of applicants, all of whom have already met the school standards, that the class is chosen after weighing a wide range of factors, among them being race. You know, I've always believed that one of the greatest strengths of America, you're tired of hearing me say it, is our diversity. But I believe that. If you have any doubt about this, just look at the United States military. The finest fighting force in the history of the world. It's been a model of diversity. And has not only made our nation better, stronger, but safer. I believe the same is true for our schools. I've always believed that the promise of America is big enough for everyone to succeed, and that every generation of Americans, we have benefited by opening the doors of opportunity just a little bit wider to include those who've been left behind. I believe our colleges are stronger when they are racially diverse. Our nation is stronger because we are tapping into the full range of talent in this nation. I also believe that while talent, creativity, and hard work are everywhere across this country, not equal opportunity. It is not everywhere across this country. We cannot let this decision be the last word. I want to emphasize, we cannot let this decision be the last word. While the court can render a decision, it cannot change what America stands for. America is an idea unique in the world, an idea of hope and opportunity, of possibilities, of giving everyone a fair shot, of leaving no one behind. We've never fully lived up to it, but we've never walked away from it either. We will not walk away from it now. We should never allow the country to walk away from the dream upon which it was founded. That opportunity is for everyone, not just a few. We need a new path forward, a path consistent with the law that protects diversity and expands opportunity. So today I want to offer some guidance to our nation's colleges as they review their admission systems after today's decision. Guidance that is consistent with today's decision. They should not abandon, let me say this again, they should not abandon their commitment to ensure student bodies of diverse backgrounds and experience that reflect all of America. What I propose for consideration is a new standard, where colleges take into account the adversity a student has overcome when selecting among qualified applicants. Let's be clear, under this new standard, just as was true under the earlier standard, students first have to be qualified applicants. They need the GPA and test scores to meet the school's standards. Once that test is met, then adversity should be considered, including a student's lack of financial means, because we know too few students of low-income families, whether in big cities or rural communities, are getting an opportunity to go to college. When a poor kid, maybe the first in their family to go to college, gets the same grades and test scores as a wealthy kid, whose whole family's gone to the most elite colleges in the country and whose path has been a lot easier. Well, the kid who faced tougher challenges has demonstrated more grit, more determination, and that should be a factor that colleges should take into account in admissions, and many still do. It also means examining where the student grew up and went to high school. It means understanding the particular hardships that each individual student has faced in life, including racial discrimination that individuals have faced in their own lives. The court says, quote, nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an application's discussion of how race has affected his or her life, but be it through discrimination or inspiration or otherwise, end of quote. Because the truth is, we all know it, discrimination still exists in America. Discrimination still exists in America. Discrimination still exists in America. Today's decision does not change that. It's a simple fact. If a student had to overcome adversity on their path to education, the college should recognize and value that. Our nation's colleges and universities should be engines of expanding opportunity through upward mobility. But today, too often, that's not the case. The statistics, one statistic, students from the top 1% of family incomes in America are 77 times more likely to get into elite college than one from the bottom 20% of family incomes. 77% greater opportunity. Today, for too many schools, the only people who benefit from the system are the wealthy and the well-connected. The odds have been stacked against working people for much too long. We need a higher education system that works for everyone, from Appalachia to Atlanta and to far beyond. We can and must do better, and we will. Today, I'm directing the Department of Education to analyze what practices help build a more inclusive and diverse student bodies and what practices hold that back. Practices like legacy admissions and other systems that expand privilege instead of opportunity. Colleges and universities should continue their commitment to support, retain, and graduate diverse students and classes. And companies who are already realizing the value of diversity should not use this decision as an excuse to turn away from diversity either. We can't go backwards. I know today's court decision is a severe disappointment to so many people, including me, but we cannot let the decision be a permanent setback for the country. We need to keep an open door of opportunities. We need to remember that diversity is our strength. We have to find a way forward. We need to remember that the promise of America is big enough for everyone to succeed. That's the work of my administration, and I'm always going to fight for that. And I want to thank you all. And I know you've been told I have a helicopter out there waiting to go up to do an interview in New York. I'll be talking more about this, a live interview. But thank you very much, and we're going to have plenty of time to talk about this. But we're not going to let this break us. Thank you.
President Biden, the Congressional Black Caucus said the Supreme Court has thrown into question its own legitimacy. Is this a rogue court?
All right, President Biden there speaking from the Roosevelt Room at the White House, expressing his deep disappointment in the Supreme Court's decision striking down affirmative action today. Now, the president said that he believes this decision basically walks away from decades of precedent and progress. He also went on to say that students from privileged families are 77 times more likely to get into elite colleges. Now, we're going to have much more on this decision straight ahead on Scripps News Live. The president also there saying that this decision is one that he's going to follow closely, saying that he believes that the precedent that had been in place for decades now was opening doors just a little wider to those who had been left behind. Again, the Supreme Court today striking down affirmative action 6-3, something that we're following closely right here on Scripps News Live. We're going to take a quick break right here, and we will be right back. I begin this hour with some breaking news right here. Less than 30 minutes ago now, the Supreme Court evacuated following the court's major decision striking down affirmative action in college admissions, ending a decades-long practice. Thank you so much for being with us on this Thursday afternoon. It's now 1 p.m. in the East, 10 a.m. out West, and I'm Veronica Cruz. Welcome to Scripps News Live. So we have live coverage for you right now on this ruling. White House correspondent Haley Bull will join us to break down President Biden's reaction to the court's decision. We just heard him speaking. Also, our Deputy Political Director, Joe St. George, has been following the details on the evacuation at the Supreme Court right now. But we begin right here with Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George, who has been there on the ground. So, Joe, we do know that the court has been evacuated. The last time we spoke, you were telling us about a potential security threat in the area. What more do you know right now?
Yeah, it's a suspicious package, which, to be quite honest with our viewers, happens from time to time in our nation's capital, whether it's the Capitol complex or near the White House, or in this case, near the Supreme Court. My photojournalist, Jay Cannon, will give you a perspective of how much we've been evacuated from the Supreme Court. Traditionally, on big rulings days, hundreds of journalists, photographers, producers line up on the steps of the Supreme Court, and you can see that we're, about 200 or so, maybe 150 yards away from the Supreme Court at this point in time. Capitol Police blasting out an alert message to reporters, to the public, saying that they are investigating a suspicious package, which is why we have been moved. They would do this on any day that a suspicious package would appear in front of the Supreme Court, but it's especially adds to the tensions here on a day in which landmark rulings came down involving affirmative action. The Supreme Court, just after 10 a.m. Eastern time, effectively striking down affirmative actions in colleges and institutions from coast to coast, private, public, universities now scrambling to figure out what their admissions process looks like going forward, not being able to ask, what race are you specifically? We should be clear, though, 9 states previously banned affirmative action prior to today's ruling. This applies now coast to coast, all states. We did get word from the Supreme Court late today that tomorrow will be the final day of their term, which means that we will get the remaining opinions, which includes student loan forgiveness. And I bring that up because right now, whether it was President Biden's remarks that we just heard from at the White House or other comments posted online, for the moment, affirmative action is in the news. But I think it's worth noting that come tomorrow at this time, the country will likely be debating the future of student loan forgiveness and whether or not millions of Americans will have a smaller balance on their federal student loan debt. Remember, federal student loan payments set to resume in later this year, September 1st, for many Americans. So obviously a dramatic day inside the court from a legal side of things, with the court ruling against affirmative action. Also now a dramatic day outside the court as we have a evacuation, at least for the moment, on the steps of the Supreme Court. Journalists, everyone moved back, streets closed. This obviously impacting rally plans. We were just told by some organizers that they were planning on rallying, protesting in front of the court around 1 p.m. Obviously, that has delayed those efforts as the police do their job, and we're certainly grateful for it as they keep the justices safe, keep the law clerks safe, and keep the public safe, and that includes concludes us here at Scripps News.
Yeah, Joe, at this point, we don't know for sure that the two are connected, that this security threat goes hand in hand with this decision that has just come down. But I wanted to talk more about the decision itself, because I know that you've been pouring through the opinion. It's multiple pages. Tell us more about what stands out to you in this decision and more about the reaction that's been coming out so far.
Yeah, I think one of the most significant impacts of this decision, at least the 10,000-foot view, is this is a court that under Chief Justice John Roberts is not afraid to really throw out the playbook when it comes to judicial precedent in our country. For decades, this is not the first time that this question was challenged in front of the court. Academic institutions began using affirmative action or a form of it in the late 1960s. There were legal challenges in front of the high court in the 1970s. But in the 70s, justices said that question can be asked. It's valid. We are in a place in our country in which that question needs to be asked to encourage diversity. And really, that's been the law of the land since that point in time. But just like this Supreme Court rolled back decades of precedent with reproductive rights last year and the controversial Dobbs decision, on this day, the Supreme Court rolling back decades of judicial precedent when it comes to affirmative action. One interesting point to note is that just a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court ruled that race still plays a role in democracy. They ruled in favor of progressives and liberals in Alabama who desperately believed that race should be more accounted into how that state drew its maps, redistricted itself and its congressional districts. In Alabama, 27% of the electorate is black, but only one of the 7 congressional districts was majority black. The Supreme Court told Alabama to redraw their maps. That's now playing out across the South. So on that issue, the Supreme Court said race still matters. But today, Veronica, on this issue of college admissions, the Supreme Court taking race out of the equation a bit today. We'll be reacting to this all day long, obviously. We just heard from the president. I know my colleague Haley Bowl is standing by at 1600 Penn for that side of this.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to be checking in with Haley shortly. Joe St. George, in the meantime, reporting from just outside of the Supreme Court, which has been evacuated because of a potential security threat. Joe, we're going to go ahead and check back in with you. Haley, in the meantime, let's go ahead and bring you into the conversation. What are they saying right now at the White House? We know that President Biden just wrapped up his remarks. What did he have to say exactly?
Well, Veronica, the president made clear that he strongly disagrees with this decision, calling it a, quote, severe disappointment. Just last year, he had taken a more optimistic tone and hoping that the court would reaffirm the current policy. And these remarks are clearly not what the president wanted to see out of this court today. These remarks marking a sharp contrast. He implored that today's decision, quote, can't be the last word, really offering a little bit more insight into how the administration views the next steps regarding affirmative action in the wake of this decision. He said he is directing the Department of Education to look at the practices in place and what can be more inclusive and which practices detract from being inclusive. And he urged colleges and universities to continue looking at diversity and adversity as they consider qualified students for admission. And he gave examples, for instance, of the location where a student grows up, the hardships they have faced and overcome, including racial discrimination, as well as factors like legacy admissions. He also said schools and businesses shouldn't use this as an excuse to turn away from fighting against discrimination. And he said more broadly that affirmative action overall is misunderstood. Listen.
Many people wrongly believe that affirmative action allows unqualified students to be admitted ahead of qualified students. This is not how college admissions work. Rather, colleges set out standards for admission, and every student has to meet those standards. Then and only then, after first meeting the qualifications required by the school, do colleges look at other factors in addition to their grades, such as race.
Now, the president in his administration has made equity and inclusion a key part of his agenda and a large part of some of the rules that have come out of the White House. Last year, he noted that he asked the Justice Department to defend this policy in the courts. Tomorrow, though, the White House faces yet another big decision, as Joe was referring to, on its student loan forgiveness plan. Now, that is something that the White House is certainly following. The president this afternoon, reportedly on his way out, remarked that, quote, "This is not a normal court." Now, at the end of all of these remarks, Veronica, he still tried to take a more hopeful tone, noting that diversity is a strength in this country. But we will certainly be keeping a close eye on the reaction going forward. The president is scheduled to have a live interview with the news outlet later this afternoon.
All right. Haley Bull live for us at the White House. Again, the Supreme Court striking down affirmative action on colleges and university campuses in a 6-3 decision. Haley will be checking back with you. Thank you. Want to get you now to some other news at this hour. A dense plume of smoke that parked over parts of the upper Midwest yesterday is now sweeping east. A cold front pushing the hazardous air mass toward the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. But this air mass is slow moving, as you can see. And that means that a dangerous haze is going to be lingering over some cities that have already been under a blanket of smoke now for days. Today, air quality alerts back in places like Pittsburgh, New York, Washington, D.C. Scripps News national correspondent Maura Sirianni takes a closer look at the cities that the smoke is hitting the hardest and the international effort right now to extinguish the blaze.
The concerns are mainly for those people in sensitive groups, but experts say none of us should be breathing in this air for too long. This map shows the smoke is expected to move east, but for now, New Jersey is in the code orange for air quality. That means at-risk groups like people with asthma will likely be feeling those effects, although the general public may not. Meantime, entire states, like you saw on that map, Delaware and Pennsylvania, are both under code red. These are images from Pittsburgh this morning. Residents in Philly, Baltimore, Cincinnati, you're likely waking up to a similar picture. Now, in this case, code red is due to high smoke particle concentration. Doctors say these particles are so small they can actually get into your bloodstream. Now in Chicago, the mayor's office there is asking those with chronic lung or heart conditions to stay inside, and we're mainly feeling the effects from the fires that are burning in Ontario and Quebec. The latest maps from Canada showing over 250 fires are still burning out of control. Canadian officials say the country is on track for its worst wildfire season in nearly 30 years, and the world is helping. Firefighters from the U.S., Australia, Portugal, France, and Spain are all working together to get these fires in Canada under control. Maura Sirianni, Scripps News.
All right, Maura, thank you so much. Coming up next on Scripps News Live, France's president calling for peace after another night of violence after an officer shoots and kills a 17-year-old delivery driver. The steps that Emmanuel Macron is now taking to restore order. Plus, Ukrainian officials arresting a man in the deadly missile strike at a pizza parlor. We'll have the details after a quick break.
Are you ready for a fresh new bath or shower? Well, now is the best time with 50% off installation and no interest and no payments for 1 year. Hi, I'm Christina, and it's time to flip your old worn-out bath or shower with Jacuzzi Bath Remodel today. Everyone knows the Jacuzzi brand. They're the most trusted name in water for over 60 years. But did you know they can install a gorgeous bath or shower that feels incredible in as little as 1 day? It's no stress and no mess with a lifetime warranty. Now let's talk beauty. You deserve to start and end your day in a beautiful space that feels great and is custom designed just for you. So call or go online now to see the Christina preferred designs like Canyon, Farm, and Urban. Now that's the total bathroom beauty that I love at a price you can afford. And how about safety? Like an ultra low profile, easy entry shower complete with grab bars and a custom design seat. You deserve safety and peace of mind without sacrificing style. Because with all the worries in daily life, taking a shower shouldn't be one of them.
Every time I stepped over my old tub, I worried I might fall. I don't have those fears anymore. Jacuzzi Bath Remodel gave me a gorgeous shower that's safe too.
I've been trying to get him to remodel that bath for years. I called and they did in just 1 day.
And at a price we could afford.
With one call to Jacuzzi Bath Remodel, you can effortlessly transform that old, ugly eyesore into the stunning bath or shower of your dreams that you'll love for years to come.
Call or go online now to jacuzzibathremodel.com to get 50% off installation. Plus, ask how you may qualify for no interest and no payments for 12 months. And when you call right now, we'll give you our complete safety upgrade for free. Go to jacuzzibathremodel.com or call 800-218-1279. That's 800-218-1279. Call now.
Do you spend hours maintaining your gutters? Save that time with LeafGuard's maintenance-free system. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS. Mesh filters sit on top of your gutters, building up debris and eventually clogging. Then they need to be cleaned too. Honestly, your home should have been built with LeafGuard gutters. LeafGuard's wraparound hood deflects debris and keeps water away from your home. The one-piece seamless system is strong, 20% thicker than average and built to last. Plus, LeafGuard is guaranteed to never clog for as long as you own your home. Right now, get a complete LeafGuard system for only $99 down, $99 a month, and $99 installation. You'll also receive a $100 Visa gift card with a free gutter inspection and in-home estimate. Damage from clogged gutters can cost you thousands. Never worry about clogged gutters again. Don't wait, you've still got time. Call 1-833-2-GUTTERS today. That's 1-833-2-GUTTERS.
Minutes after the hour now, developing in France, a police officer facing a voluntary homicide charge. It all comes after 2 nights of fires and violent protests across the country. The protest started after a 17-year-old delivery driver was shot and killed by police during a traffic check on Tuesday. Authorities have now been investigating that officer who pulled the trigger for voluntary homicide. During a special security meeting this morning, French President Emmanuel Macron acknowledged people's frustration but called for peace. Police forces have now been quadrupled. Now to Russia, where there are unconfirmed reports right now that the second in command of the Russian invasion of Ukraine has been removed from his post. It's reportedly for his role in the Wagner Group's short-lived military uprising. Our international correspondent John Beaver reports.
It was widely predicted that Vladimir Putin would take swift measures to try and re-establish total control after the aborted rebellion last weekend. If unconfirmed reports are to be believed, that appears to be happening. It's rumoured that Sergei Surovikin, the deputy commander of Russia's military operation in Ukraine, has been relieved of duty. There's even some speculation on the Telegram messaging service that's widely used across Russia. He could be in a Moscow prison that was used during Stalin's Great Purge in the 1930s. It's also where Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich is being held on espionage charges. Highly decorated by the Kremlin, Surovikin is nicknamed General Armageddon by some in the Russian media because of previous ruthless tactics used in Syria. Attributing the information to US officials, the New York Times has reported that he had advanced knowledge of the rebellion and investigations were ongoing about whether he'd helped plan it. General Surovikin was last seen 5 days ago, urging the Wagner rebels to turn back to their bases whilst they were on their march toward Moscow. The awkward pre-recorded message has been described by some as looking like a hostage video. The Kremlin has declined to answer any questions about the general or his whereabouts, simply saying that the army and the people of Russia all stood by President Putin during the uprising. Last night, the Russian president made an extremely rare public meet and greet appearance, not seen since before the pandemic, where he met seemingly adoring members of the public. John Beaver, Scripps News, Helsinki.
Now, in the meantime, at least 11 people were killed in a Russian missile strike in an eastern Ukrainian city. And there are fears that more victims might be in the rubble of a popular pizzeria. Scripps News international correspondent Jason Bellini spoke with someone inside that building. He has this report.
For Ukrainian soldier and blogger Roman Drakamets, Tuesday evening was supposed to be a relaxing one, a break from the front lines. A peaceful meal at a popular pizzeria in Kramatorsk with his sister, Lila, and her fellow humanitarian aid volunteers, until this happened.
We got shot.
A Russian missile strike on the very restaurant where they sat. Footage from that day shows Roman, Leela, and others springing into action,
Just being hit.
racing to save anyone they could. As the dust from the explosion cleared, the horrific damage revealed itself. Blood-stained booths, overturned tables, mangled decor, and the most gut-wrenching sight of all, the bodies.
Such a wonderful evening, and such a Russia still existing.
At least 11 people have been reported dead in the attack, including 3 teenagers. Officials say the number could climb as rescue workers continue to comb through the wreckage. Crowds are still gathered near the once buzzing eatery, anxiously awaiting news of their missing loved ones. Ukraine's intelligence agency says authorities detained a man who allegedly helped direct the attack. The strike also damaged 18 multi-story buildings, 65 houses, 5 schools, and a shopping center, among other buildings.
Completely unexpected, no sign, no sound. At one moment, immediately came a very, 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 very hard boom, and it was the strike of the rocket.
Kramatorsk is no stranger to devastating violence. Missile strikes over the past few months have hit a packed train station, schools, buildings, and garages, leaving dozens of people dead or wounded. As for Roman and Leela, they escaped the blast with just minor concussions. Roman is no stranger to close brushes with death. He shared his thoughts on this when we visited him in Kramatorsk a couple months ago.
Almost all people don't want to die or afraid to die, right?
Right.
I try to find a way how not to be afraid.
For all Roman has seen in war and shared about his experiences, he wrote in a post on Instagram after the attack on the restaurant, "There are no words." The spokesperson for Russia's defense ministry confirmed on Wednesday the attack on Kramatorsk, but he says they used precision weapons to hit a military target. The death toll for civilians in Ukraine since the start of the invasion last year is set to top 6,000 people. Jason Bellini, Scripps News, Zaporizhzhia, Ukraine.
Straight ahead on Scripps News Live, summer travel woes continue for airline passengers across the nation right now. We're going to take a closer look at the mounting delays and cancellations for you. Plus, heads up if you are taking a cruise this summer. A norovirus outbreak has been causing some serious problems for hundreds of cruise ship passengers. We're going to tell you more when Scripps News Live comes back.
I don't want to take medication. Wow. It's so refreshing to find a doctor who gets what you need. Great. Good. Dr. Stafford just kind of speaks your language.
Search, read reviews, book a doctor on ZocDoc.
It's no secret that car repairs are expensive and not getting any cheaper. An out-of-warranty vehicle could cost you thousands unless you get the CarShield Advantage before you break down. That's the power to protect yourself from expensive repair bills. Let me tell you about the CarShield Advantage. This car is out of warranty, and this car got coverage through CarShield. As you can see, a breakdown could cost you a lot of money unless you call CarShield before that happens. Once your vehicle is out of warranty, it's more likely to break down. With so many moving parts in your vehicle, it's really only a matter of when it's going to happen. Having the CarShield Advantage helps protect you from having to pay for expensive repairs. Let's look at coverage. Your plan can cover critical parts in the engine that you need protected, like your engine block, oil pump, and timing gears. Customers can also save on repairs for the transmission, air conditioner, compressor. Before your check engine light comes on, you should call CarShield because they help cover your cooling system, radiator, and water pump. With so many parts and systems protected, like your power windows, backup cameras, power seats, LCD screens, power steering, plus so much more, it's easy to see that CarShield can help save you thousands on car repairs. The real CarShield Advantage isn't just the money you'll save on car repairs. It's the included benefits that will make you feel safe and secure, like rental car options. You'll also get 24/7 roadside assistance that includes flat tire repair, emergency fuel delivery, lockout help, courtesy towing at no additional cost. Calling CarShield gives drivers the advantage over expensive car repairs. Don't delay. Call CarShield today.
Protect yourself from the unprecedented rise in costs for diagnostics, labor, parts, and taxes. Call CarShield now to save with our price lock guarantee. Call 800-358-8984, 800-358-8984, 800-358-8984.
When Lila was ready to sell her ring, she sent it to Worthy, where they took care of everything and auctioned it on her terms. Then, Worthy sent Lila her money. You're worthy of more. Get started at worthy.com.
Sunday nights on In Real Life.
For the baby?
Yeah! Scripps News journalists take you off the grid.
We were just a bunch of kids with a camera. Stunts have become more specialized.
And to the heart of the story.
When the pandemic hit, the American dream kind of changed.
There were a lot of warning signs. They just didn't care.
In Real Life, Sunday at 8/7 Central, only on Scripps News.
Welcome back to Scripps News Live. I'm Veronica Cruz. So if you are taking to the skies this 4th of July weekend, be prepared to pack some patience. U.S. flight delays and cancellations have been spoiling plans for many Americans. Bad weather and smoke from Canadian wildfires have been getting their fair share of the blame, and travelers have been having flashbacks to similar problems during previous high travel periods. So far today, FlightAware is showing more than 2,500 delays across the U.S., nearly 470 cancellations. And trouble on the high seas as well. There have been 13 outbreaks and counting across cruise ships. The CDC sounding an alarm about norovirus, which is a contagious stomach bug that's ruining summer vacation for many Americans. National correspondent Stephen Graddick has more on the outbreak.
Headlines declared a norovirus outbreak, a horror, after it swept through a Celebrity Summit cruise ship in May, leaving nearly 200 passengers and staff with cramps, vomiting, diarrhea, and more. The latest outbreak on a Viking cruise ship in June sickened more than 100 people. Since early January, nearly 1,700 people across all cruise liners have come down with the illness. Dr. Shivanjali Shankaran, an infectious disease expert at Rush, says the outbreak could be a symptom of so-called revenge travel, a term used to describe the desire to travel after lost time during the pandemic.
A whole bunch of people are traveling. Many viral infections in general we've seen more than we had in the past few years.
The big three companies, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, and Carnival Cruises, have reported near or over 100% occupancy in the first quarter of 2023. According to CDC data, a majority of the outbreaks this year were on Royal Caribbean international trips, accounting for nearly 500 cases since the beginning of the year. Princess and Celebrity Cruises have seen 3 major outbreaks apiece. In a statement, Celebrity Cruises told Scripps after the most recent outbreak in May, they implemented rigorous safety and cleaning procedures, but did not give more specifics or share what caused people to get sick. Here's what the CDC says about how people catch the virus.
Norovirus can stay on surfaces and objects. So if you touch something that has norovirus on it, you can get sick. Other ways you can get norovirus are eating contaminated food or drinking contaminated water.
As contagious as the norovirus is, experts say it can spread even faster in close environments, such as cruise ships, where people congregate for longer periods of time. And doctors warn only a small amount of virus is required to cause infections.
The alcohol sanitizers are not as effective. The washing hands with soap and water, especially before and after you eat.
The CDC's list of outbreaks doesn't include ships with less than 100 people on board or trips where less than 3% of passengers catch the virus. Norovirus outbreaks are relatively common amongst cruise ships, but onboard illness dropped amid the pandemic with only 1 incident reported to the CDC in 2021 compared to the 10 outbreaks in 2019. Stephen Graddick, Scripps News, Atlanta.
I'm Veronica Cruz. For the audience leaving us right now, your local programming is up next. And don't forget to check us out on scripsnews.com. If you are staying with us, here's what's straight ahead. Older Americans making up more of the workforce than ever before. And now some employers are finding new ways to keep them happy. Also, an Arizona woman thankful nearly a year after her dramatic rescue was all caught on an officer's body camera video. The moment she finally got to meet her hero. We'll have that story for you next.
I've been putting off getting life insurance, and I'm not getting any younger.
Have you been thinking about getting a life insurance plan but just keep putting it off? Was that a yes? Then this message is for you. I'm David Denowitz, and I know the importance of life insurance. And that's why I'm here to tell you it's not too late to get the coverage you need
If you're between the ages of 45 and 85, you can get a policy with a benefit of up to $25,000 and rates available at $5 a week. The phone lines are now open. Just call 800-354-6059.
And your acceptance is guaranteed.
I have a pre-existing medical condition. Is my acceptance guaranteed?
Yes.
Can I get accepted without a medical exam?
Yes. If you're between 45 and 85, you can't be turned down for this guaranteed acceptance life insurance regardless of your health. Plus, there's no medical exam and no health questions, and rates start at just $5 a week. Remember, if you're between 45 and 85, you can't be turned down regardless of your health. Nothing's more important than family. So call now, pick up the phone, and get guaranteed acceptance life insurance today.
Just call 800-354-6059.
I'm 72 and on a fixed income. Is my acceptance guaranteed?
Yes, your acceptance is guaranteed and your rate can never go up for any reason. You can't be turned down regardless of your health. There's just one simple question. Are you between 45 and 85? If you answered yes, don't wait another minute. Call now.
The call is absolutely free and there is no obligation to enroll. Just call 800-354-6059. That's 800-354-6059.
Hey there, welcome to Scripps News Live. Great to see you on this Thursday. I'm Veronica Cruz. Let's get you caught up right now on the day's top stories. A 6-3 vote with the Supreme Court deciding to strike down affirmative action policies in college admissions. That ruling stating that using race as a factor in college admissions violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. That decision was a response to cases against Harvard and the University of North Carolina. A number of universities maintain that race ensured more diverse student bodies. Opponents have argued using race as a requirement discriminated against qualified students. Smoke from Canadian wildfires has been spreading to the mid-Atlantic and Northeast while it continues to linger over the Midwest. Pennsylvania and Delaware are among states that have issued code red warnings, meaning that the air is unhealthy for everyone. In Chicago, the mayor has asked people with chronic lung and heart conditions to stay indoors. Well, United Airlines has been struggling a lot this week. The carrier canceling 2,300 flights between Saturday and yesterday, and it canceled 20% of its flights on Tuesday and then 39% of its flights yesterday. United CEO is blaming air traffic control shortages and bad weather in the Northeast right now, and that earned this response from Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg.
United Airlines has some internal issues they need to work through. They've really been struggling this week, even relative to other U.S. airlines. But where we do agree is that there need to be more resources for air traffic control. That's why we're hiring 1,500 more controllers this year. We got plans for another 1,800 controllers next year.
United is saying off-duty flight attendants are now calling in from across the country to help handle open trips, and it expects things to improve by the weekend. Well, it is a good day to be a stock market investor. At least that's where the Dow is concerned. Take a look at the boards right now. Lots of green on the board right now. Dow rising more than 200 points after banks passed their stress tests. The Dow is up 251 points right now. The S&P is up about 15, and the Nasdaq has fallen about 5 points. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, in the meantime, saying that American banks might find themselves under extra scrutiny following 3 bank failures over the spring. And he says the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, Signature, and First Republic banks have exposed vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. One idea that might be considered is requiring banks to reserve more capital to guard against loan losses. Now, despite the Fed raising interest rates, the U.S. economy grew at a 2% annual pace from January through March. That revised number from the Commerce Department was much higher than the 1.3 rate previously announced. Now, both numbers are much lower than the 2.6% annual rate of economic growth from last October through December. As the U.S. economy continues to perform better than most around the world and unemployment continues to stay near historic lows, many employers are trying to hold on to their best employees. There are more than 10 million job openings in the U.S. right now, and some are due to expansion, while others are due to employees simply walking off the job. So many, in fact, that it's led to the term quiet quitting.
This level of flexibility and freedom, I think, is a good thing because it requires employers to think through how are they going to acquire, manage, and retain their employees.
Which brings us to more older Americans working than ever before. Employees age 50 and over currently make up more than a third of the workforce, and many employers are now looking at new ways to keep them from leaving. One of those ways is granting granternity leave, which is allowing paid leave for people who become new grandparents. Bradley Sherman joins us now live. He's the founder and CEO of the advisory firm, The Super Age, which helps companies deal with demographic change. Bradley, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Victoria.
All right, so we've never heard of this term granternity, which is a new term. Explain exactly what it is and how many companies across the United States are actually participating in it right now.
It's not so much a new term globally. In fact, there's a number of companies overseas that have instigated this new type of benefit for their older employees, in large part because of the demographic pressures on their labor market. In fact, the first such utterance of this term was grandparent leave that came out of Australia about 15 years ago, a company called Westpac. But there are a number of different American companies that are doing this as well. In fact, Tara Weiss's article from the Wall Street Journal earlier this week highlighted a few of them, including Cisco. There is a growing need, though, for American companies to really consider their labor force, not just with the traditional working age population, that being people ages 16 to 64, but also those 65 and above in that traditional retirement age.
And it's interesting that you mention that this is something that is more popular overseas, because when you look at companies overseas, global companies, those are companies that have, historically speaking, granted maternity leave and the like. How is this being received in America, especially taking into consideration lots of men couldn't even get paternity leave?
Yeah, America tends to be a laggard when it comes to offering benefits to its employees, at least within the past 50 years or so. However, in the 1950s, following the Second World War, we experienced a similar labor crunch. And it was during that period that American businesses offered some of the most generous pensions in the world, offering American workers healthcare benefits that rivaled any state-sponsored system overseas. We are entering that period again of tight labor markets, in large part because we simply had fewer babies for the past 25 years. Now those children are becoming adults. Take for this instance, when the baby boom happened, there were 76 million of them born. This was a huge growth in the American labor market. But believe it or not, Generation Z is actually only 69 million people. And Generation Alpha following them looks like it's on track to be even smaller. So this isn't something that goes away in the next year or two. This is something that stays with us for at least a generation, if not more.
That's right. And with so many older people in the workforce today, let's talk about how things are changing for companies. What are employers doing? I mean, especially employers who might be finding new value in having employees with experience. What are they doing specifically?
Across the board, regardless of age or ability, people want flexibility. During COVID, everyone got a little taste, for the most part, unless, of course, you're a frontline worker, of flexibility. Now, everyone in every age category wants it. We're also starting to see a real change in the way the American family operates, where more generations are living together under one household. More generations are now taking care of different aspects of family life, including earning. So grandparents, at least in the sense that we grew up in, are no longer the primary or secondary caregivers of their grandchildren. They're also income earners for the household. In addition to this, businesses are starting to take a look at things like caregiving leave, so that you can actually take care of your aging parents that can no longer work and or take care of themselves. And believe it or not, some leading employers are actually instituting menopausal leave, because we've never had this many women in middle age in the workforce before.
It's funny that you should mention that, because I was part of the sandwich generation as well. I was taking care of my mother, also raising my son, and was the generation in the middle of all of that. And you're saying that we're probably going to see more of that. And you'd also said that the segment of the workforce over the age of 75 is expected to double over the next 10 years. What is behind this trend? You'd mentioned that less Americans are having children. Is there anything else that's driving this trend?
That is the primary trend of on the labor force supply side. But there's also an issue around actually long-term income. Our systems really weren't set up for people to retire for extended periods of time. So Social Security benefits don't really pay out the way they should. People never save the amount that they should for retirement either. So people get to 65, they decide to retire, and then all of a sudden they realize, oh my gosh, I don't have enough savings in place. So going back to work is one of the solutions to help alleviate this financial pressure and keep people out of poverty. But the reality is, this is a long term trend that actually goes back to historical norms for us in our society. It was really only the 20th century where people actually took a proper retirement. Prior to this, people worked well until their later life, in fact, until they couldn't. That was the norm for humanity. So we're going back to a historical norm here.
How else do you see things changing for older workers in the future, if this is going to be the future?
Well, I think for older workers, one thing that they're definitely going to demand is flexibility. What's definitely one thing that they're definitely going to want. I think we're going to start seeing some structural changes in the way we work with employees. For most of our lives, we've actually dealt with a category of employees that seemed relatively disposable. That's not the case anymore because we have these 10 million job openings and we have no people to fill them, or at least not enough in that traditional labor pool. Because older workers will be able to demand maybe a little bit different approach to work later in life, I certainly think we can see more job sharing coming in the future years. I think we can also see that individuals, businesses, and maybe even the government will make greater investments in the individual worker because they're assets now. They're assets that businesses really want to keep. So, if you're like my grandfather, he was a Westinghouse man. He spent his entire career at Westinghouse because Westinghouse believed in him and they made investments in him, much like they did for most of his generation. Today's younger people, Gen X and lower, really were churning generations in terms of the amount of years that they spent within a workplace. Businesses don't want that churn. It costs a lot to recruit and it costs less to retain, keeping somebody in that job. So as businesses make this turn, we're going to see a lot of different shifts coming in the years. But one of the big things we're going to see is benefits and investments in the individual worker.
Now, I think historically speaking, older workers have cost more, workers with experience. How do you square all of this? Do you think that corporate America will be willing to pay for experience?
I think corporate America will go through a negotiating period. So there is experience in terms of tenure. That's what gets you to that high salary. But I think over the course of a working life, going from a working career in the 20th century that was 35 to 40 years to one that might be 50, 60, or even 70 years, yes, if you can believe that, we are actually going to see that people have different careers throughout their lifetime. In fact, older workers today work in a myriad of jobs that aren't necessarily high paying. A number of workers are in the gig economy. A number of workers are becoming entrepreneurs. A number of workers just want a part-time schedule. And they're willing to trade with the businesses on getting these for salary, as long as they can stay engaged for perhaps 10 or 20 hours a week, not necessarily the full-time schedule. Older workers also have this added benefit, the later life employees in particular, those 65 plus, because they're the beneficiaries of Medicare. They actually have health care being offered to them by the government in a single payer system. So with that in mind, businesses actually can save there at the end of the day.
All right, it's also interesting. Bradley Sherman is the founder and CEO of the Super Age. Bradley, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, any new parent or maybe a grandparent can tell you that the cost of diapers is not cheap. In fact, a study by the National Diaper Bank Network found that 1 in 2 families cannot afford diapers right now. Jada Williams with Scripps News Tampa says in Florida, diapers will actually become tax-free in 2024.
Any parent is familiar with the diaper aisle in the store. On average, diapers for one baby could cost $70 a month and $840 a year. But change is coming in the state of Florida. By the new year, the sales tax on diapers for children and adults, as well as other incontinence items, will disappear, freeing up anywhere from $54 to $135 a year, according to state analysis.
Taking that load off of the family, that they don't have to worry about how many times a day am I going to have to change my child's diapers and can I afford it, gives them the room and the space financially, but also just emotionally, to be able to respond to their child better.
Champions for Children is there for struggling parents, handing out about $72,000 a year.
We are seeing a huge need, as you can see, for diapers. it's not covered by, diapers are not covered by any of the kinds of assistance that are out there. So with everything being so expensive right now, rent and food and gas and everything, it's really hard for families to be able to afford diapers.
The National Diaper Bank Network released a new study showing 1 in 2 families can't afford enough diapers to keep their infant or child clean, dry, and healthy. That same amount cut back on things like entertainment, food, and utilities to afford the diapers. That's what inspired Tori Jesselon to start Baby Cycle.
We actually started in my garage about 11 years ago, and I just realized that there was a huge need for not only diapers, but other necessities for families in our area, and there was no centralized way for these families to get them.
While this tax exemption will free up money for many, partners like Champions for Children and Baby Cycle will be there for those still trying to make ends meet. In Tampa, Jada Williams.
Straight ahead on Scripps News Live, it's been almost a year since the 988 Suicide Lifeline launched. We're going to take a closer look at the impact it's made on people battling mental illness next.
I was having problems with my legs and my feet.
I suffered a lot of cramps, swelling.
I would dread going up and down steps.
Tingling in my legs due to circulation issues.
The aches and pains have just continued to increase.
Did you know if you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, or are over 40, your leg aches and pains could be from poor circulation? Revitive can help reduce leg aches and pains, swelling, and cramps. Revitive uses breakthrough technology to get your calf muscles pumping like a second heart to increase blood flow, reducing leg aches and pains, cramps, or swollen feet and ankles.
Plus, it's drug-free.
The cramping was terrible, and I don't get that anymore. Thank you, Revitive.
Revitive is FDA cleared and clinically proven to increase oxygen-rich blood flow during use. The smart stimulation works so well, over 3 million people use Revitive.
As a firefighter, I'm constantly on my feet. I wish I had known about Revitive a lot earlier. It would have made a huge difference in really who I am today.
Revitive has given me a better quality of life because I am living without pain.
Revitive reduces leg pains 2 times more than exercise alone in just 6 weeks.
We want to take walks. We want to do more social activities, just the typical things in life that I did not feel well enough before Revitive that I was able to do.
Now, Revitive is regenerizing my legs and making me feel like, let's do more.
Go to Revitive.com now to learn how Revitive can help reduce leg aches and pains, swelling, and cramps.
The doctor said, go for it. And I'm in the best shape in terms of my legs and my ankles and my feet than I've ever been.
Try Revitive. You will see the difference. It works. It worked for me.
Get the most out of life with Revitive. Visit Revitive.com. That's REVITIVE.com. Or call
1-800-317-6641. That's 1-800-317-6641 today. Or visit Revitive.com. Order now.
Here's the trick plays, and if ever
Local hero, national champ, now he's home and he's trying to save it.
Hey guys, am I dreaming or can we actually win this thing?
How does Klein Inspector get among the most big verdicts and settlements of any law firm in the country? Because Klein Inspector is an award-winning team with 5 doctor lawyers, the most of any firm in the United States. And that's why the New York Times calls Klein Inspector a powerhouse law firm. So if a defective product, motor vehicle accident, or medical malpractice caused a catastrophic injury, call Klein Inspector.
Local, national, and worldwide headlines, breaking down the day's biggest stories with live reporting from around the globe.
I'm Del Walters, and this is The Debrief.
Live tonight, starting at 6/5 Central, only on Scripps News.
Welcome back. I'm Veronica de la Cruz. Next month will mark 1 year since the federal government launched its 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Eleni Dow with Scripps News Phoenix shows us how the program made mental health resources more accessible to those in need.
Picking up that phone and admitting you need help can be a hard thing to do.
When you're at that point, you feel you have nowhere to turn. We are here. And, please call us.
And people are calling that new 3-digit number. The 988 Crisis and Suicide Lifeline launched a year ago in July. It's designed to make it easier for those in need to call rather than the previous 10-digit number.
We've seen a 40% increase in call volume to 988 than the 10-digit number that was used before last July.
Tempe organization Solari is one of 2 Arizona crisis call centers answering. Since the launch, they've answered more than 60,000 calls and received more texts and chats too.
We've seen a 1,400% increase in text volume nationwide when it comes to accessing 988. And it tends to be with individuals, our youth, young adult population are preferring to interact by text resources.
A majority of calls coming in, the trained professionals are able to help stabilize the person in crisis. Just about 1% of those calls that come in need police involved.
I do anticipate 988 calls will continue to increase.
The organization tells me they do have enough staff to handle the volume of calls, and they even take calls for other states.
Nobody's immune to crisis. Nobody's immune to needing to reach out for help. That phone can feel heavy to pick up, but I want the public to know that these resources are here.
I'm Melanie Dow for Scripps News.
Irvo Otieno's family is calling for the DOJ to open a federal investigation into his death. Otieno died March 6th in a psychiatric hospital in Virginia. Surveillance video shows 7 deputies and 3 nurses pinning him to the floor until he stopped breathing. The deputies and nurses are being charged with second-degree murder in connection with his death, but Otieno's family attorney says the state prosecutor's office lacks the resources to prosecute this case. And pop icon Madonna is postponing her celebration tour as she recovers from what is a serious bacterial infection. The 64-year-old was rushed to the hospital after being found unresponsive in her New York City home Saturday night. Her manager says that she spent several days in intensive care before going home yesterday. We're told an announcement regarding new tour dates will be coming soon. And President Biden uses a CPAP machine in order to treat sleep apnea. The White House releasing a statement after the president was recently seen with imprint lines on his face. Biden has documented his history with sleep apnea since 2008. And according to the American Medical Association, about 6 million Americans in the U.S. are diagnosed with this condition. It can lead to drowsiness and increased heart attack risk if it goes untreated. In Arizona, a woman is happy to be alive after officers pulled her from a submerged SUV last year. And she never got the chance to personally thank her heroes until this week. Venton Blandon with Scripps News Phoenix shows us a reunion 1 year in the making.
Give me your other hand! Give me your other hand! Shouts from an Apache Junction police officer. Cries for help from a woman inside a submerged SUV.
Oh my goodness, so much has happened since that day.
Sue Teeters was stuck inside floodwaters along Apache Junction Road July 28, 2022.
I could have died, I didn't. Was thankful for not dying, but at one point I was also a little bitter and upset about my dog.
Claire, her dog, drowned, but Sue still wonders why her life was spared.
I've never come that close to actually having an experience of I could have died type of thing.
Every now and again, Sue says she is reminded of that day.
Or I have one grandson that says to me every time it rains, don't go to Apache Junction, you know.
She tells ABC 15 she was in a little shock a while after that rescue.
There was just a lot of emotions going around.
As for Sue's rescue, she remembers the officer's touch.
They were holding my hands and yelling at me to hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, because the water was still coming so hard on my car.
And she also remembers him telling her she was slipping.
Everything's happening in fast motion. You know, you have 400 things going through your head. Am I going to get out? Is he going to get me out?
The officer working to save Sue has helped with countless rescues in his 12 years of policing in Apache Junction.
I would say just kind of time slows down in that moment a little bit.
But the moment he gripped her and pulled her out,
it was pretty gratifying.
Sue and the sergeant met for the first time Tuesday during a shoot for a law enforcement-based show launching on the First Responders Network this fall.
I was actually thrilled to be able to meet him and see him in person, and it made it so much more personal as to what he did for me.
I knew that, you know, she was somebody's daughter, mother, sister, aunt, and ultimately I didn't want to have to make that next of kin notification.
I'm Vincent Blandon for Scripps News.
Oh, that is just so sweet. And coming up next on Scripps News Live, at just 5 years old, he is already a dribbling sensation. We're going to show you how he is leaving his mark on the hardwood next.
Here, Americans will spend $41 billion on auto repairs.
That's right, billions with a B. Why is that number so high? Because cars break down. Your vehicle is going to end up in a shop like this too, and if it's no longer under warranty, you're the one who has to pay the bill, and it could cost you thousands of dollars. That is, unless you call CarShield. With a plan through CarShield, administrators will pay for those costly repairs directly to the mechanic of your choice, including dealerships. That means you get protection on major parts and systems like the engine, transmission, electrical systems, and more. Plus, 24/7 emergency services for flat or damaged tires, lockouts, dead batteries, and towing at no additional cost. And there are even rental car options to keep you on the road.
I've been a mechanic for 35 plus years now. I've seen thousands of repairs over the years. My happiest customers are the ones that come in who have some kind of auto protection policy that's going to cover the repair that they wasn't expecting anyway. I feel great about recommending CarShield to everybody I see.
CarShield has a rich history of dependability, reliability, and success, and has been featured on leading networks like ABC, CNN, Fox News, and more. CarShield is America's most trusted auto protection company.
My mom told me to call CarShield, and I saved $5,000. You should always listen to your mom.
As soon as my car broke down, CarShield jumped into action, and I had my car back within days.
I've been with CarShield for close to 7 years. I have 3 vehicles covered, and I saved close to $9,000.
I called CarShield and saved over $5,000.
Yes, CarShield is a good value. Every plan through CarShield comes with a price lock guarantee, which means no matter how many repairs you need, the price you pay today will never change for as long as you cover your car.
Call now and save money with your price lock guarantee. It's not a matter of if your car will break down, but when. Call CarShield now before it's too late. Call 800-287-5264. 800-287-5264. 800-287-5264.
I wonder if Instacart can tackle this honeydew list. Need paint for the deck, gear for the kids' track meet, and the essentials. Honeydew list completed. Saturday saved. Visit instacart.com or download the app and get free delivery on your first order.
Sure, you should teach him to ride a bike. Then use Greenlight and teach him how to invest in bikes. Teach him to be smart about money and he'll go far.
Super far! Oh, hey, Mom!
Navigate the world of money together. Invest in your best investment. Greenlight.
I work at Lumi Deodorant, and I'm going to tell you how to get the best deal on Lumi. It's the starter pack. You pick 2 full-size deodorants, and you get 2 mystery items for free and free shipping. So now's your chance to try Lumi Whole Body Deodorant with 72 hours of odor control.
You're watching Scripps News, streaming everywhere, totally free. Want to see more? Grab the app on your favorite streaming platform or go to scripsnews.com to find every way to watch. Go to scripsnews.com now to find out more.
Welcome back. Quick reminder right here, we would like to hear from you. You can always give us a call on our Scripps News viewer hotline. The number's on your screen. It's toll free, 1-833-4-SCRIPPS. Feel free to share your comments and your story ideas. So New York Yankees fans have something new to brag about, and they can thank pitcher Domingo Germán.
Stands in his way. Grounded to third. Donaldson has it. There it is. Perfection for Domingo Germán.
Wow. Well done. What you just witnessed there was a rare feat in pro baseball. Germán pitching the 24th perfect game in Major League history last night, which means that he didn't allow any hits or walks, and there were no fielding errors in the team's 11-0 blowout of the Oakland A's. Seattle Mariners ace pitcher Felix Hernandez was the last pro player to accomplish this back in 2012. Wow, congratulations. I'm Veronica Cruz. Thank you so much for joining us today. For the audience leaving us right now, your local programming is up next. And remember, you can always check us out on scripsnews.com.